So, gang, I'm not really sure what happened there. My computer just froze and it did a memory dump. So, the hopefully we're on the same one. Otherwise, it's going to be in two parts. Um, so where did we leave off? We left off with the fact that he was he stated that we have what is it? It's better to keep the kids in the same home rather than split them up. And I remember being a kid in the '90s, and my parents would argue that your kids should go live with one parent over another. And what the studies are showing though is to get to the point of not just that point, but to the point that fatherless homes are greatly affecting children in their developmental ages. Was that the fact that kids under the age of 10 are developing and having those things like rough and tumble play, right? Things that are showing kids social constraints as well as role model figures, as well as not just the breadwinner, right? Which is most fathers' roles. Um, it's also it kids are shown to have smaller telomeres. And telomeres, if I remember correctly, a telomere is, I believe, the tail ends of the DNA strands. So the longer the telomeres you have, the longer life expectancy you can expect to have, right? So it's they don't know how, at least as far as what I've gathered, they don't know how they can tell this, but it is certain that the correlation is there, that longer telomeres equals longer life expectancy. And they're showing the kids born or kids raised without fathers. And I think it's very detrimental at like the earlier ages. Like by the age of 4, they should have a father figure in their life. But kids that hit the age of 14 that have never had a father figure have significantly shorter telomeres than kids without. So, which is kind of like, that's kind of serious shit right there. Like that, people need to know that. People need to be aware that, sending dad to jail, mom not getting along with dad is detrimental to their kids' health. Because I know there's a lot of moms out there that take a lot of abuse, and I know there's a lot of dads out there that take a lot of abuse, and I know that there's one side over the others trying to keep shit together. But you're in this together. You're here for the kids, and your job is to keep it together because they are more important than you. At the end of the day, they're more important than you. You're not important. You ignoring your own stuff, not dealing with your stuff, is detrimental to them because it's, we're all in the car together. You're the one driving. If you drive off a cliff, you're detrimentally affecting everybody else in the car. If the most important passengers in the car are the ones in the back seat, in the child seats, then you're still important as a driver, which means you have to be a safer driver, which means you have to be more cognizant because you are a protector, whether you are a mom or a dad. One position is not more important than the other in terms of the mom and the dad, but in terms of the children, they are more important. And so just all these different things that got pointed out in the book, right? Like men's groups he started, how our society is changing, where mom a lot of times is more of the breadwinner, and a lot of dads will stay at home. And he goes to break men of that habit where they have to go to work, and they shouldn't stay home to take care of the kids, is something that a lot of people have to do. And while I was in the middle of reading this book, I spoke with a friend of mine who actually took a severance package from his job to stay home with his kid. And his wife went back to work. And so now he's raising his youngest. And that like right there was like, wow, it is happening all around me. That is a phenomenal, you know what I mean? It's a phenomenal thing. And I started thinking, because there's always constant drama in my life. Like if I lost my 9-to-5 job tomorrow, I would have work. At the end of the day, do I want the work? Or could I make my work my additional, any of my side work, my investment properties, anything like that? Can I make that work and stay at home and raise the kids? And I've been contemplating those contingencies regularly, and it's like almost every other day that like I'm getting some threat or drama at work that it's like you start thinking about contingencies, because eventually somebody's going to have an axe to grind. You're going to get put on the chopping block, and it may not be a fault of your own, but you got to prepare, right? Like everybody's, oh, my union's going to protect me, right? Like we talked about earlier, right? But yeah, you know what? Oh, my government's going to take care of my retirement with Social Security. No, you don't rely on the government. You shouldn't have to rely on the government for anything, because nowadays the government is showing us a perfect example why you don't rely on them, because they don't even give a shit at the highest levels to provide us with global protection, or because I'm a little government guy. I want my government to give me nice level roads for commerce. I want them to orchestrate some sort of like fire suppression, whether it's a volunteer or a paid fire force, or and very importantly, I would like them to have law enforcement to prevent crackheads from coming into my house, killing my family, and doing bad stuff and taking all of our shit, right? Like those are the things that I want from my government, right? That's it. And every one of those things, I also am aware that is my responsibility as a dad, right? Like my responsibility as a dad and a homeowner is to also protect my shit on my own. But if I need backup, I should be able to call upon the local PD. So if somebody breaks into my house, tries to, murder me and my family and take our shit, I'm going to defend myself. That is my number one protocol. Or that is my protocol. Like, right, I'm the first line of defense. And then the PD shows up, right? And then, maybe they sling justice in case, I'm not quick to the trigger, or, they get the jump on me or whatever, and the cops show up too late and the stuff's all gone and all the people in the house are dead, right? Like, I would like a little bit of justice, for the lack of, protection, or the failure in that flaw, right? So that's it. That's about it. You know what I mean? Like, my house catches on fire. You know what? I could use some extra dudes to put that shit out, right? Like, I get it. That's my job for fire prevention and all those other things that the fire department does. It's my responsibility for my house to make sure that my house doesn't catch on fire. Like, they're not in my house every day. They're not preventing fires before they start. That's my job. Their job is to put it out once it starts, and maybe help educate the people around us. So, like, those are the little things that I want out of my government. So I'm not expecting my government to do any of that, but to do beyond that, I really could care less. So I don't expect my government to save money for me or be financial literate for me, because government can never handle money. They suck at it, right? So so I'm not expecting to rely on my government for that. So I'm not expecting to rely on a union to protect my job. I rely on me to protect my own financial interests. I rely on my kids rely on me to provide my financial interests. I don't rely on the government to rely for them. It's me. That's it. The buck stops here. So, with that said, I'm always constantly thinking of contingencies on how I can better protect my family, especially because I'm so outspoken. Being outspoken, guess what? You've got a target on your back. And I live with the target tattooed on my back. I actually might get one. I have 0 tattoos, by the way, and that would probably be my first one, would be just a ginormous bullseye on my back, because that is how I live most of my life, being an outspoken individual. People are always out to get me. And so I always have to be one step ahead of everybody else on being the breadwinner. So I have to, think of contingencies. If this were to disappear tomorrow, if that were to disappear tomorrow, if someone were to attack me on that end, if somebody did this, if somebody did that, I'm always thinking about stuff like that. So if I were to lose my job tomorrow, what would I do? Chips are down. I'd figure out a way to generate money and be a stay-at-home dad. That has been coming across my plate a lot lately. And then I keep thinking about the post-COVID world with the school districts that we're in, and the state mandating all these crazy crap. And it's like, you know what? If I had to be a stay-at-home dad, my kids would get pulled from school. Maybe not the oldest, because she's pretty acclimated into the school district, being 15 and only 3 years from high school diploma. But the younger ones, I'd take them home in a heartbeat, and they would all be one-on-one. Like my kids, they would be ready for college at 11. I'm certain of it. because I have a thirst for knowledge, and I know that I could just feed their little brains with more knowledge and I would keep them at a 6-hour day like the school district does, but on average, the average homeschool kid only actually needs about 3 hours of schooling. And so you go, well, then why do we send our kids to school for 6 to 7 hours? Socialization. I actually just spoke to a friend about this tonight. Socialization and babysitting. That's really what it is, so the rest of the parents can go to work. That's all it is. It's all babysitting. 50% of it's babysitting. The other 50% of it is like the government's grasp on what a curriculum should be. So, but yeah, this book has taught me just a phenomenal amount of just things I just didn't think about, and it's somewhat changed my life in terms of the second half of the second quarter of the book, read by the co-author John Gray. He talks about ADHD. He talks about diet. He speaks to a lot of other books that I've already read on diet. Wow. Like, all these different things, all these misnomers. Are ADHD kids, which primarily are boys, are they deficit? Do they have a deficit in attention? That doesn't seem right. Deficit means a lack of, right? They have, oh, wait a minute, attention deficit. So I guess they do have a lack, yeah. But hyperactivity, okay, so yeah, never mind. I screwed that up in my head. I kept thinking they don't have a deficit in hyperactivity. They do have a deficit in attention. But is it a deficit? Because they have a lot of it. I think that's what he pointed out, was they don't have a deficit in attention. They have he uses a term, and I'm drawing a blank on it now. It is mismanagement of dopamine function. Dopamine, yes. Dopamine, limited dopamine function. So dopamine in your brain, like every time you put a post out on Twitter or on Facebook, you look at your post and you see how many likes, how many views, how many things. Every one of those little things, and you constantly checking it. Like you watching a sports game because you have some money on it, little dopamine hit. It's an incentive reward structure that's built into the chemical processes of your brain. And what happens is that somewhere along the line, stimuli to your child's brain has been misaligned to the point that they are like on screens now. Screens give you far more dopamine hits than the dopamine satisfaction you get by pleasing your parents, for example, or pleasing an authority figure like your teacher, doing your work, things like that, things that are requested of you that might seem boring, but you get a little dopamine incentive by doing it. Oh, I've completed my homework for my teacher. My teacher appreciates that. Like that, boom, little dopamine hit, right? But not as cool as steal a car. Okay. All right, just ran over a guy. Just, you know what I mean? You're playing Grand Theft Auto. I don't know. That was the first thing that popped in my head, right? Like you're running. You're delivering pizzas. I don't know what the game's about, right? Like you're playing Halo and somebody's shooting at you, and like you're trying to shoot as many guys as possible before the end of the death match or whatever it happens to be, right? Every single thing about that is dopamine hits, in addition to the stimuli given off by the screen, the lights, the glowing, the flashing, the things that just burn you out. Your brain is like on overdrive because it's like these are daylight lumens coming at me, so I don't even know that it's not even time for bed yet. It's like I'm in summertime mode all the time. So he also points out that all the screen time and all those dopaminergic responses and the increase of them and video games in general, are leading to greater childhood depression and antisocial behavior and all these other things that are based on chemical responses. And you start pouring random crap in your gas tank, see what happens to your car. Eventually it doesn't run, right? Like mineral deficiencies, those are a huge one. So like what you put into your gas tank is what you get out of your car, right? Like there's just a lot of things like that. Very interesting stuff. I highly recommend the read. I highly recommend this read so much that I've actually bought 3 physical copies of this book. 1 is on the way. 2 have already been handed out. And I told the people to read them and pay them forward to somebody they think they're going to change. If they can't think of somebody that they could give the book to, that they could change the life of, then they should pass it back to me, and I will find somebody else. And it's my pay it forward method. I've also gifted 3 different digital copies of this book. So I've got 7 copies under my belt. I have my own digital copy. I have 3 other digital copies that I gifted out in the last 2 weeks. And I got 3 physical copies, 2 out and 1 on its way to go out. There's already a recipient ready for that one. So I'm like, this book changed my life to the point that I bought 6 additional copies to give to others. That this book speaks to me. Like, Jordan Peterson books speak to me, but I don't think they speak to everybody. And this had so much universal knowledge in it that was related to a very important topic that I wanted to get them out there to people so they could understand what was going on in the world and to have their lives changed. This is a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. Like all books, there are there's some dull jargon. Like, maybe you don't want to hear about dopaminergic responses, right? Like, maybe you're not sure what a telomere is. Maybe you have to do your own little research. There's an appendix to the book. He talks about suicide rates amongst men. Just tons of little caveats you wouldn't be aware of. Most failed suicide attempts come from women, because women are more likely to seek help and use suicide attempt as a cry for help to get the help. Where men, on the other hand, or boys, have a tendency to commit to the suicide because they're actually in a state of depression where they don't think that they can be helped, and that's why they're depressed. So they say, screw it, the world hates me, so I'm going to kill myself, and blah, blah, blah. The world will be better without me. And we believe it, and then we kill ourselves, and we actually have a greater success rate at suicide, which is not a good success rate to have. And he talks about that. And he talks about different things, suicide prevention, things to watch out for, just tons of things. Like, it's phenomenal how much he crammed into, 16 hours? 15 hours and 10 minutes into this book. It's worth the read. It's worth the lesson. There was marital advice in here. Both him and John Gray are marriage counselors. I'm trying to think I'm just going to read you the summary of what Audible says on the book, and just in case I miss something. So the summary is, what is the boy crisis? It is a crisis of education. For the first time in American history, our sons will have less education than their dads. It is a crisis of mental health. As boys become young men, their suicide rates go from equal to girls to 6 times that of young women. It is a crisis of sexuality. Sex is a minefield for our sons. They're bombarded with mixed messages, afraid of being either too sensitive or not sensitive enough. It's a crisis of fathering. Boys with less involved fathers are more likely to drop out of school, drink, do drugs, become delinquent, or end up in prison. Like, there is so much information in here. I barely scratched the surface in what I'm going to say is probably almost an hour podcast on reviewing this book. I gave you an hour of a synopsis and then some of my takes. So, yeah, all right. So I gave you 15 minutes of actual synopsis on the book and what they cover. It is a crisis of purpose. Boys' old sense of purpose, being a warrior, a leader, a soul breadwinner, are fading. Many bright boys are experiencing a purpose void, feeling alienated, withdrawn, addicted to immediate gratification. Compounding this issue are addicting video games and lead to distractions and ADHD. So what is the boy crisis? A comprehensive blueprint for what a parent, teacher, policymaker can do to renew our sons' sense of purpose, to help them become men, fathers, and leaders worthy of our respect. So, and then to that point, there is something that was done in, I believe it was Ohio. I would double check that, but it's called the First Things First initiative that he described. He describes about how 25% of the correctional facilities in this municipality or in this state I believe it was Ohio, in that state, that he describes that the first things first, Chattanooga. What the hell's Chattanooga? Mississippi, Missouri. Anyways, I know there's a choo-choo. Anyways, they tried the first things first initiative. The prison population was 25% of fathers who were in prison for failure to pay their child support. There was no mechanism in the system to help those fathers even attempt to pay their child support. He gave one example of a father that was shot. He got out of jail, and he instantly had an arrest warrant for not paying his child support while he was in jail. He got pulled over for a taillight. They went to arrest him, and he had been in jail for so long that he ran and was shot for fleeing. Like, that's ridiculous. So they created the first things first initiative, where they actually take fathers out of jail. They put them in this program. They reintroduce them to their children's lives. Dropout rates from school diminished. Drug addiction. I think it was it out of 100 dads, only 3 went back to jail for failure to pay child support and I think a punishment. And one of the punishments he points out in the book, he goes, nobody's punishing a dad for not being in their child's life. They're punishing them for some arbitrary dollar amount that some judge slaps on them. That's ridiculous. You want to punish a deadbeat dad? If there is a deadbeat dad? If the situation constitute that the father is a deadbeat, then punish him by making him be with his children. Because unless he's physically abusive, there is far less harm that the father can do than not be in their children's life. The harm that's caused by him not being in their life is actually detrimental to their health. They're shortening their telomeres. They're not getting the socialization. They're being put further behind than any of the other children because their father's not present. And this is not to say bad things about the single moms who are raising these kids by themselves, because maybe dad was abusive. I'm not saying this is true in all cases, but when 25% of a state's prison population is fathers that couldn't keep up on child support payments, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. So it's an amazing book. You need to read it. Highly recommend it. They won't let me give it more than 5 stars. And other than that, guys, I will catch you next time on Life22. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you go out there today and reserve that copy. The book is like $15 for a hard copy paperback. I think it's $25 for a hard copy, for a hardcover, and it's like $14.90. You save 20 cents if you get it on Audible. Obviously, if you're an Audible member, I think it's like $21.50 if you're not an Audible member. It's probably more money on the hard copy too if you're not like an Amazon Prime member. So, but yeah, definitely it's a no-brainer. Get out there, get reading. We'll catch you guys next time. Life22.